Because I am a sentimental idiot, I do enjoy seeing a little bit of family lineage when it comes to my pro wrestling. I mean, there always has to be an interesting relationship there, given that the father will understand how hard this work is, and now their son wants to get into it. But what the hell can the dad say? You can't do this, son. All the son's got to do is look up at his dad and went, but dad, you did it. Argument over. It certainly is something special because every promotion on the planet always wants to highlight if somebody is a second or third generation wrestler, and that's because usually it permeates out through the TV screen and the crowd can understand, oh, I get it. This whole family is just really good at wrestling. The skill runs in the blood, and out of somebody's loins comes the likes of Randy Orton, The Rock, or even Brian Pillman Jr. These guys are everywhere. What will really get your emotions going is when you can start to make connections between the two, especially if one of them has won a title and then the other one wins that same title years later. I mean, I feel like crying right now, and I know you do too. It's just special, and I'm sure it's how my own father feels knowing that here I am being a bald idiot, being a massive dick on YouTube. I bet he's like, I'm so proud of that guy. I think I need to ring him later and check. Anyway, that to one side, I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 11 father and sons who won the same wrestling title. Number 11, Alpha and Samu. Brace yourself because the Anoa'i family is gonna feature a lot in this list. I mean, I don't know what they did, but they're basically responsible for all of professional wrestling. It must be something in their semen. Straight away, I regret saying that. The cool thing about Alpha and Samu is that not only did they both hold the WWF World Tag Team Championships, but they also held them at the same time. So the father was the champ, the son was the champ, they were together. Excuse me 1 second, I think I've got something in my eye. Coming about when Alpha and brother Sika were the champs and the latter got injured, instead of making them give up their gold, somebody decided, why don't we just bring Sika in? And that's exactly what happened, and good old Daddy-O ran wild and ensured these prizes were kept safe and around their waists. Samu would also win these titles again with his cousin Fatu, who later on would become Rikishi. Wrestling is ridiculous. Number 10, Sika and Rosie. We stick with the Anoa'is for all the reasons I just mentioned, but Sika returns here because his own child Matthew was also able to smell WWF World Tag Team Champion success. If you're now saying to yourself, who the flub is Matthew, you probably know him better as Rosie. Entering into the WWE fold in 2002 as one half of 3 Minute Warning, which by the way was an underrated tag team, I quite enjoyed it. When that was all said and done, he transitioned across to teaming with the Hurricane, and yeah, he became the superhero in training. And I know what it stands for, and you know what it stands for. Let's not even talk about it. And if you don't, that's good. Don't even think. Don't even think, let it go. Anyway, that pairing would win these belts in 2005, and somewhat unfortunately, when they did break up, that was kind of the end of Rosie's WWE career too. Just to give you some extra trivia as well, Sika has another son, and his name is Roman Reigns, and I think he did all right for himself too. Number 9, Blackjack Mulligan and Barry Windham. Yet more tag team success here, and we may as well mention that as well as the Anoa'is, the Windham Rotunda dynasty basically kicked ass when it came to wrestling too. They tore through the landscape and refused to be anything but a top draw, and one member responsible for all of this was Barry Windham, and he won a ton of titles in the NWA, WCW, and of course the WWF. It was during the latter that he would become a tag team champion alongside Mike Rotunda, who was not only his brother-in-law, but also in later life would become Erwin R. Schweister, and this happened in 1985 when they beat the North-South Connection. So yes, Windham's father, Blackjack Mulligan, also won these titles 10 years prior to this, alongside Blackjack Lanza, who is also the uncle of JBL. This is exhausting, somebody help my brain. It was extra nice as there was literally 10 years between this. One happened in 1975 and the other happened in 1985, and it goes to show how the world of professional wrestling can form family bonds and why we should all be kinder to the tag team title scene. Look what it's doing right now, look at the love. Number 8, Ric Flair and David Flair. A bit of a different entry here, as David Flair did flutter away from the wrestling scene pretty much as soon as WCW was done, until the Flair lineage was picked up by Charlotte, and for my money now in the WWE, she's one of the best athletes they have, hands down. When this was going on though, David was able to call himself the United States Championship after the general manager, who was Ric Flair, just stripped Scott Steiner of that title and gave it to his son. From there, the Nature Boy continued to be involved in his kid's career, protecting him as well as his team, the Four Horsemen, did. And that's basically how David Flair got through most WCW Nitros and pay-per-views. Of course, Rick was able to win that same title 6 times throughout his incredible wrestling run, and I'm sure if he was ever allowed to compete for a women's championship, he would have done that too, because he is Ric Flair, and if that had happened, then we could be saying the same thing about Ric Flair and Charlotte Flair, but we can't, although I will say I'm sure Charlotte's going to win that belt loads more too. Number 7, Chavo Classic and Chavo Guerrero Jr. We twist the running order here yet again though, because now we're not talking about a dad that won some gold and then their son did the same years later. Again, we're flipping it around. So after Chavo Guerrero Jr. had been the Cruiserweight champion in the WWE, Chavo Classic, his dad, won it afterwards. Still need to lie down. It is fair to say that when Classic did win this championship, it basically underlined what WWE did think about their title, but still, it happened. And when it happened, Chavo Classic actually beat his son for it in a triple threat match that also featured Spike Dudley. More trivia for you, yes, Chavo Classic was the oldest Cruiserweight champion in history. In terms of the son, he was quite fond of this championship because he won it a total of 6 times. And surely that has got to bring these two closer together. Unless, of course, obviously you hate your dad, and when you go to work, your boss says, bro, you losing to your dad tonight. That will probably cause the end of that relationship. Number 6, Ted DiBiase and Ted DiBiase Jr. Back to the tag ranks now, but let's not forget that both Ted DiBiase Sr. and Ted DiBiase Jr. also both held the $1 Million Championship, because of course they did. It was only held by 4 people, and the other 2 were Virgil and the Ringmaster, and they were essentially tied to the hip when it came to the $1 Million Man. It's also one of those things that probably stopped Ted Cena from winning the proper world belt, and that is ridiculous because he deserved it. Anyway, the father was able to win the tag team belts 3 times alongside Erwin R. Shyster, who makes a second entry in this list. And of course, they were Money Inc. And Ted DiBiase Jr. won them twice when he was teaming with Cody Rhodes as Legacy. From there, it was a very odd journey for Ted Jr. Once painted as the next big thing, he was even in consideration for breaking the Undertaker streak. And can you imagine what Reddit would have thought about that? It wasn't meant to be though, because a mere 6 years after he had signed on the dotted line, he was out of wrestling altogether, and now he's doing his own thing. I think he's like a business manager, he's a motivational speaker. I'm sure the main thing is that he knows everybody has a price. Idiot. Number 5, the British Bulldog and David Hart Smith. Way back before the internet was a thing, Davey Boy Smith was an absolute hero on British shores. He had managed to not only crack America, but win the WWF Tag Team titles once with the Dynamite Kid in 1986 and 10 years later when he was teaming with the late great Owen Hart. 14 years later, history repeated itself when his offspring David Hart Smith was able to do the same thing as the Hart Dynasty as he teamed with Dyson Kidd. They became the Tag Team Champions too. And that was kind of it for DH Smith in the WWE too. He lost those titles, he got released in 2011. And we haven't seen him back in the fold since. He is kicking ass in Japan. If you don't know about that, go check him out in NJPW. And I have a sneaking feeling that one day he will be back in the Fed. Number 4, Rikishi and the Usos. We stay in the tag team ranks because that just seems to be the way of things right now. And of course, we go back to the Anoa'i family because again, if they didn't exist, you wouldn't have Raw, you wouldn't have SmackDown, you wouldn't have anything. It has been well documented on WWE TV, the relationship between Jimmy and Jay and Rikishi. He's their dad, and they both found similar success, again, in the tag leagues. Rikishi picked up the gold 3 times, twice alongside Rico and once alongside Scotty 2 Hotty, and very nicely it all fits in. The Usos have won the tag team titles 3 times as well, and they're one of the best teams throughout the WWE and also run a very successful penitentiary business. I bet they're making father proud. It also seems very likely they'll win even more going forward, even though there are rumors at the moment that their contracts are coming due and that they may be willing to discuss going to AEW. So let's see what happens there. Number 3, Rocky Johnson and The Rock. Nobody now remembers that The Rock was a tag team champion and he won the thing 5 times. 5, he won it 3 times with Mankind under the Rock and Sock connection, once with Chris Jericho, and a last time with The Undertaker. This was the same for the man that birthed him because Rocky Johnson did team up with Tony Atlas and they became known as Soul Patrol and kind of changed the wrestling business. When they did win those titles in 1983 by beating the Wild Samoans, they became the first ever African-American team to do so. And that is huge. So it just seems that the Johnson family in general are trailblazers because of course The Rock has now gone on to Hollywood and completely changed the game. And who would have thought that when Dwayne Johnson was teaming with the Dead Man? No one looked to him and went, oh, one day that guy will be the biggest grossing movie star in the world. And if you did, stop lying. Number 2, Mr. Perfect and Curtis Axel. This is one of the best entries on this list because when I think of the old school Intercontinental Championship, I think of Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. It was almost as if the belt was just attached to his torso permanently, and I remember all the great matches he had with Bret Hart. I also truly think if he wasn't struck down by tragedy, he'd still be contributing to the wrestling business today. As I'm sure you either know or have figured out, it was also won by his son Joe Hennig, or Curtis Axel, and to this day it remains the only father and son pairing to do this when it comes to the IC belt. Perfect won it in 1990 from the Ultimate Warrior before dropping it to the Texas Tornado, and Axel found success by defeating both Wade Barrett and The Miz to raise that thing high in the air. That happened on Father's Day too, which I just think is a nice spin to that story. I also want to point out that Curt Hennig has another son called Hoss Hennig, and Hoss, if you don't get involved in wrestling, what are you doing? Your name is Hoss, which is also one of JR's favorite words. I promise you'll absolutely smash it. Here's hoping. Number 1, Dusty Rhodes and Dustin Runnels. The American Dream Dusty Rhodes did win a bunch of championships throughout his career, and one of these was in 1987 at Starrcade when he pinned Lex Luger to become the United States title holder. Interestingly enough, when he got to WWE, he never won much gold there, or anything to be honest, and I'm guessing it was the polka dots. The polka dots were probably enough. His offspring Dustin, better known to you and I as Goldust, was already doing this long before he ever painted his face and dressed up in a yellow jumpsuit though. He managed to become the #1 contender by defeating Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and then after some kerfuffle with Rick Rude, eventually he did become the United States champ. Cody Rhodes, Dustin's other son, was never able to repeat this feat, although he did win the United States Championship in New Japan. So if you want to count that, you can't. That's not how this list works. I explained it to you. You can't just keep adding in belts because they've got the same name. What are you thinking? Now, naturally, all we need is for Shane McMahon to win the WWE title, and he can follow in Vinnie Mac's footsteps, and only then will we all be able to sleep at night. So that was the whole point of all of this list. You got to the end. Shane McMahon, go do that. Go live the dream. And finally, we can put this all to bed. Now, don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know how much you don't want Shane McMahon to win the World Championship. Like, share, and subscribe. Head over to WhatCulture.com, read yourself some articles, follow WhatCulture on Twitter, at WhatCulture WWE. That was gibberish. Just go follow and go watch more videos here on WhatCulture Wrestling because you're here and I like seeing you. My name is Simon Miller from WhatCulture. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you soon.